Hello everyone and welcome back to episode 11 of Let's Talk. I'm Scott Yingling and I'm with YNG Global, and today let's talk about how I understand Krav Maga. How do I understand the deployment and the comprehension, and how do you teach and effectively transfer the knowledge that you have as a Krav Maga instructor, or as a new Krav Maga practitioner? What learning pathways should you have in your mind to be able to adapt and advance as quickly as possible with the knowledge that's being given to you, or that you're giving as an instructor? First of all, let's talk about the globality of the principles of what we teach. The quickest way to transfer the information and to make the students understand, and for you, the Krav Maga practitioner, to understand what's going on, is that you have to understand the principles behind everything. Okay, principles meaning if someone is going to grab me around the throat, okay, the principle around that is I have to survive before I am capable to do a response or an attack. So the principle behind a defense off a strangulation, or someone that's strangling me, is I have to defend against that before I'm able to do further techniques. Okay, so just an example, the principle of anything that is causing pain or danger to me means I have to defend against that initial attack. So principally speaking, anything that's attacking my throat, well, before I do anything, I have to get that off my throat to let me breathe, to give me a second breath, so then I can then move on. Okay, so once you understand the principle behind the defense of an attack, you can then move on to the tactics that are formed based upon that principle. So there you have your principle, and so now we're going to have the tactics. So here I'm just going to put a P and a P and a P, because I can't write sideways and upside down. But here are your principles all on the outside. And now what we have coming from the principles are our tactics. What tactics do we use to mitigate or to defend the aggressions that we're having based upon the principles that we have? So principally, I know that I have to, we'll change the subject. I know principally, if someone's going to punch me, if someone's going to punch straight into me, that I need to be able to get off the center line of that person, and I need to be able to maintain my center line on that person. Okay, so now tactically, how do I do that? Okay, so if someone now is attacking me straight forward, technically I'm now going to have to do some type of hand and body defense to be able to defend against the attack that's coming in. So the principle for me is that I need to defend against this technique. I need to make sure that I'm not getting hit. Okay, it's very clear. The principle is not to take the punch or not to take the strike. And tactically, how do I respect that principle? Well, that principle would be tactically stepping off and doing a hand or arm and now body defense. Okay, so now I have a principle. I know that I have to evade this initial attack, and now tactically I know that I need to do some type of hand, arm, forearm, and body defense to evade this initial attack. Okay, so now we have the principle. I have to evade the initial attack. I have a tactic. The tactic is I have to do an arm and body defense at the same time, because if I do one without the other, then the technique doesn't work. Everything has to be an arm and body defense. So that's my tactic. So now what's my technique? So now we're going to come back and talk about what technique do we use what technique do I use to defend against that? Okay, so if it's a straightforward, a straight strike coming in, well then my technique is going to be an interior defense, coming back to the tactic, which is going to be my arm defense, with a rotational body movement without moving my feet for the initial defense. So now I'm going to have my internal defense with my body rotation, and then that technique is going to lead me to tactically defend based upon the principles that I understand already, that I need to be able to get off that center line and get away, okay? Another example would be coming back to someone strangling me, okay? I know if I have someone's hands around my throat, the principle of defending against that is that I need to be able to breathe, and I need to get those hands at least somewhat off of my throat and let my airways be liberated so that I can breathe, and able to give me the second or two that I can respond tactically to that. So therefore then my technique would be a plucking maneuver to be able to breathe with either a knee or a shin strike into the groin, now stepping offline and then throwing strikes, 3 or 4 several strikes into the face of the opponent, as I tactically and technically step offline, step away, and then scan. Okay, so you have your principles, and then that's going to come into your tactics, and then once you understand the tactically why you're doing it, now you can start getting into the techniques of what you do. Okay, so now once you have all of that and you have the comprehension as a teacher, you understand why you're teaching what you're teaching, or as a student, you need to understand from the very beginning why you're learning in the order of things that you're learning. Okay, so it's a two-edged sword. There are no bad students, there are only bad instructors. So if the instructor doesn't understand principles, tactics, and techniques, well then you as an instructor are not able to give your students the tools that they need to defend themselves. Okay? Tools meaning if I'm going to take someone's hand off of my throat, I'm not going to grab their wrist. I'm going to use a knife hand type maneuver. I'm going to use an inside plucking maneuver. I'm not going to pull down on their hands. I'm going to squeeze my shoulder blades. I'm going to plop their hands. I'm going to pluck their hands out to the exterior to be able to liberate my breathing pathways. So that's the tools. The finality, the small parts are the tools that we teach or that we learn. But the problem that I see in lots of Krav Maga schools and lots of teaching everywhere is that we want to teach the tools before we teach the principles, the tactics, and the techniques. Okay, so we're trying to teach do this, but then the student doesn't understand why they're doing this. So they're trying to just copy you visually what you're doing, but then their technique isn't working or isn't correct because they don't understand actually why they're doing it. So you can't, as a teacher, expect a student to employ tools that they don't understand the principles, tactics, and techniques behind them. If I give you a hammer and I say go do something with the hammer, if you've never seen a hammer before your entire life, then how are you able to properly employ the hammer as a tool? You have to understand the principles of how it works. You have to understand the tactics of how to employ that object, and you have to understand the techniques of physically how to use a hammer. And then once you understand all those 3 levels of comprehension, but now you can actually use that tool. Okay? So then now what that brings us all down into is mass times speed equals force, okay? So if someone, if they know that this is how I punch, but they don't understand the principle of punching, if they don't understand the mass of my hand times the speed of my hand equals the increased impact that I give, okay? So that's the principle. If I'm just saying punch like this, well then they don't understand the principle because I'm showing the tool. So we need to make sure that we're teaching the principles, and you as a Krav Maga instructor, if you don't understand why a punch is a punch, if you don't understand how to develop force and impact out of a punch, if you don't understand those things, well, I'm not a boxer, I'm not a karate, I'm a Krav Maga person. All of those things, the best Krav Maga techniques in the world are not effective if you don't understand the dynamics and the principles behind those techniques, okay? So we really want to make sure, and the point of why I wanted for us to talk today was to understand this scenario. You need to understand that we need to be teaching and learning principles first. Once we understand those principles, then we need to start moving on and adapting the tactics that are based off of those principles. Once we understand the principles and the tactics that come from them, now we can start learning techniques. And this is a pretty quick process. I'm not saying that there needs to be 6 weeks on principles and 4 weeks on tactics. If I'm showing somebody a plucking maneuver on a throat, I can teach them the principles, the tactics, techniques, and tools in one class, okay? But we need to teach it in that order. I'm not saying necessarily, when I said earlier that it's going to be a beginner, intermediate, and advanced. You can become a beginner, intermediate, and advanced on a plucking defense on a throat grab in one class. On understanding that, you will not be able to reproduce and have the tools unless you have a massive load of repetition under stress and fatigue and things of that nature. But you can have the principles, tactics, and techniques all taught or learned in one class, and then it's based on the student to do it repetitively, or the teacher to put the student in those stressful situations to where they can now incorporate that into their physiological and neurological responses. So guys, I really wanted that for Let's Talk today, for us to talk about this plan, because I've seen a lot of schools and a lot of places that don't understand the scenario, that are teaching other things, and I would love for you to comment, send me a direct message, let me know what you think about principles, tactics, techniques, and tools, and where you are in this scenario, okay? Are you the teacher? Are you doing it right? Are you the student? Are you doing it right? If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to send all out and share these videos, because I really believe that the conversation, speaking and discussing about these things, whether you think I'm right or wrong, I'd love to hear from you, okay? So please like, subscribe, follow, whatever you need to do. On YouTube, we're going to put a subscribe button down here somewhere. I don't know where it is. I'm not quite a ninja on YouTube yet, but we're going to get that button in here somewhere this time. And guys, I'm Scott Yingling, YNG Global, and keep training.